Услуга «Я твой работник».
Hi, welcome to AverageDrafter Draft 6. Today we're going to look at a draft that's a little strange because it started off as an okay white draft, but because of the lack of depth in the packs, and because some of the cards were pulling me in one direction and some cards were pulling me into another, it kind of ended up being a little hodgepodgey. But fortunately I was able to take this deck and take it into the finals and end up with a second place finish. So let's take a look at what we got. Right off the bat, we're looking at a fairly weak pack. The cards that are sticking out to me most, of course, are the two White Rebels. The Fortune's Thief, I haven't really got a chance to play with or against. I imagine in some situations, particularly against something like Green-White, it'll more or less keep you from losing the game ever. But I stick with my white plan and decide to go with the Encore. I think in future situations, I might go with the Seekers just because I think the Evasion is probably a little bit better. Stick with white here. You'll notice that this is a pretty weak pack as far as depth goes. There's two really good cards and then there's a huge drop off in card quality. There's no real obvious pick here. I decided instead of picking maybe the Gnar or the Flowstone Channeler, I go with what I consider to be the most powerful card in the pack in the Sedge Sliver. This is kind of just an insurance policy, you know, give me something to start with in case the white just completely does not pan out. I think the rest of Pack 1 kind of demonstrates one of the big problems I have with the way that WotC does their print runs in Time Spiral. The common print runs are separated into two sets of basically varying quality commons. You've got two sets that they have where they put most of the quality commons, and then you have two sets where they put a lot of the below average commons. And if you look at any pack that you draft in Time Spiral, the ones that are on the left, on the top row, are always of better quality than the ones on the right. This is because of the way they have it set up with this print run. Now the problem with this, besides WotC kind of making a determination of what the better cards are, for instance Momentary Blink is in the below average common runs, but the big problem is if you run across a run of average cards in the quality section, then it really comes a problem because you have packs that just have no depth, and most of the packs that are in this draft, especially in this first round, just have no depth whatsoever. For instance, you can end up with a pack that has Chromatic Star, Tolarian Sentinel, Flowstone Channeler, Trespasser Ovek, Spinneret Sliver as their quality cards, and then you have the rest of the commons are filled out with the below average section. So you end up with a pack with like absolutely no depth whatsoever. And if you look through the print runs, you'll see runs of that all throughout it. So the chance of you ending up with a pack that only has maybe one or two good commons at most in it is pretty high. Pack 2 is about different strong cards pulling me in different directions, and because I didn't end up with a really strong card selection from the first pack, I'm pretty much open to anything that the cards are telling me to do. So the first pick here is the Armory Scout, trying to lean me more towards a heavy white deck. The Might Sliver kind of pushes me into the direction of drafting a Sliver deck. I have the Sedge Sliver already, I have the Bone Splitter, so if I can get a few more Slivers, say a couple of Watchers and maybe another Bone Splitter, some Gem Hides, there's a good chance that I'll end up with a fairly good Sliver deck. Because the rest of my deck isn't that strong, that I'm looking for anything to strengthen it up. If I can get enough Slivers to make an effective Sliver deck, that would definitely help out a lot. That being said, I think I carried that theory a little too far here. I want to draft a Sliver deck, but at the same time, I don't have a huge amount of Slivers to work with. So instead of trying to force the Sliver deck, which is what I do with this pick by picking up the Watcher Sliver, I really should have picked up the best card in my colors in the pack, and that was, of course, the Castle Raptors. I think there's probably a point where picking up the Watcher Sliver would have been a better pick, but I'm far from that point as far as what I've got in my deck so far. At this point, the strategy is still to draft green and try to get as much as I can, so the Penumbra Spider fits in really nice with that. Now I come up against a pack that's pushing me back into my original direction of drafting mostly white. Not only is there a Crusader in there, but there's also a Cavalry, which is more or less an indication that white's still open, it's still not being drafted, there just hasn't been much of it in the pack so far. So I take the Crusader and then I reaffirm myself that I'm going to start drafting white heavy again. So now we have the Trump here. which of course is going to push me into green. So solid in my white, and I'm pretty sure I'm going to be playing 3 colors. Now it's more or less a matter of figuring out the ratio of red and green. What I'm focusing on for the rest of the draft is getting as many good white cards as I can and having red as my second color and green as my splash. I know that the slivers in some form or fashion are going to be in my deck just because of the numbers that I've drafted them and just the kind of general weakness of the deck overall. So I'm not going to completely ignore the slivers, but at the same time I'm not going to go out of my way, for instance, picking the Fortify instead of the spin red sliver. I'm not going to go out of my way to try to make a sliver deck. Hopefully in my games I'll either draw a lot of slivers or a lot of white cards, but not a combination of both. So pack 3 finds me getting pulled back into heavier green with pretty much the only decent card in my colors being Thallid. So I picked that card up thinking, well, I don't have that much red. I can go ahead and just use red as my splash. But then the second pack, lo and behold, there's a Fireball Kavoo. So again, I get pulled back into the direction of red. At this point in the draft, there's just not enough picks for me to seriously consider making green my secondary color. So red is going to be the secondary color. My green is going to be a potential splash with Trompe the Domains and Might Sliver, and white's going to be my base. I gave a little bit of consideration to the Bone Splitter, but I decided the Rage was just overall going to be a better card for me. The rest of the draft goes more or less predictably for me. The only really questionable call, I think, is the Watcher Sliver over the Halberdier. But since it's white and it's also a sliver and it's going to help out my other slivers, I think that's the right call. And the rest of the deck, I'm just trying to get as many playables in there as possible. The deck I end up with is fairly weak. I think it has a lot to do with the lack of depth, and on the backside of each one of these packs, there's nothing for me to choose from. Also didn't happen to open up a lot of stuff in my colors. I checked the signals. I checked which cards were missing. Usually there were black and blue cards from each one of the packs as far as the commons go. So I don't think I chose the wrong colors. There wasn't the color depth that there usually is for red and white in this draft. I built the deck okay, I think. I included the Sidewinder and the two-headed sliver because I wanted to kind of get as much use out of my other slivers in the deck as possible. I also think they help out with Trompe and Fortify by getting some initial early damage in, but also acting as warm bodies to take the bonuses of those two spells. I might have been able to find the place for the Sedge Sliver, even if it's just as a 3 casting cost 2/2, that maybe would allow me to regenerate with a Chromatic Star. Also considered putting in the Molten Slackheap for regeneration purposes only, but at the end I decided that was just going to muck up my mana base too much, and that the cards that I had in its place were probably going to serve better purposes. So that's the deck. I managed to get second place with this deck. The deck performed moderately well. I did get good draws, and I got consistent mana without having any fixtures whatsoever in the deck. I'll have those games posted up as soon as I get them processed, and I hope you enjoyed this draft.